Mr. Dean Okai Snr, is the past an excuse?
No, it's a reason. So, look, I've heard lots of comments. I don't know what people's academic study of African history is or Europeans' involvement. When I say that we're part of a 500-year Black experiment as Africans, from our kidnap, from colonialization, from intentionally underdeveloping our countries, to our nations receiving independence, which was given, not gained, because independence is gained by warfare. So when it's given, you are still governed by the so-called mother nations. So whenever we had any leadership that was determined to become self-determined economically, they were assassinated. So I think it shows a slight naivety and lack of awareness around history when we talk about excuses. And the fact that we enter our children into a system that is created to oppress us is why we remain in the same situation. So we cannot talk about Jews without first understanding that Ashkenazi Eastern European Jews extrapolated themselves from the system, which is a national system. They're not under the Department for Education with their schools because their schools have a sovereign status. They teach their own curriculum. They uphold, promote, and preserve all of their cultural traditions. They don't capitulate any of that for any reason, because if you try to force them to do that, you'll be labeled anti-Semitic. Now, I use the term Afrophobic because if you force us to capitulate to your system, then you're Afrophobic. We know this as a byproduct of your history, which kidnapped us and made the legislation of our kidnap legal, which made the torture of our people legal, where if we were raped, beaten, or killed was not against their law. Now, in the Caribbean, it was out of sight, out of mind, which is kind of how British racism is enacted. Whereas in the States, they were on domestic territory in terms of the enslavement. But let's not be under any illusion that England and the alphabet soup that they have as their international intelligence agencies continually with other delivery partners underdevelop our progress. In this country, where we've been for over 70 years, institutional racism from the police, from the NHS, from employers, from local authorities has always been and remains in subtler and more sophisticated ways of delivery. Now, the only way to circumvent that is to work within self-determination by recognizing our sovereignty. First, you would have to identify by ethnicity as Africans and not by race as Black, because Black doesn't mean anything. Anybody can self-elect to be Black and thereby usurp our funds, monies that are intended for the so-called Black community, because it actually means nothing legally. So as Africans or African Caribbeans, because it's a term that we're used to and comfortable with, now that term doesn't just mean Africans from the Caribbean, it encompasses African people from the Caribbean and mixed race people in Britain. As Africans of the diaspora, we have to understand that we have a commonality. So ADPAC always looks for our common denominators, because if we can suffer a common fate, then we have to understand that we move forward under certain auspices on code. That codification is an economic union. The European Union wasn't a cultural union. Italians don't respect English food. It was an economic union, which is why it worked. When we extrapolate our finances to establish first our own academic trusts, then we teach our children outside of legislation. And then it is just a process of osmosis, of onboarding our children from their schools to ours as we build a robustness and have access to the statutory funds per child. Now we're thinking independently. And it's not because we all get on. No group of people all like each other or get on. We're the only people who wholesale purchase this naive statement, we don't get on. We do get on. Plenty of African and African Caribbean people run businesses, have successful communities in pockets. We are collectively inadequate. So once we recognize that we're just representative of any other people, it only takes a small cabal and the correct vehicle to improve and increase our socioeconomic mobility. And then it's whether we adopt en masse. So there's no big masterclass that's going to happen for African people in Britain. Slow exposure, drip feeding, being consistent with delivery every day, demonstrable services that are superior to what the so-called host nation offers. And that's the only way that we're going to circumvent the effects of racism. Not by English people being decent, because we're not talking about individuals now, we're talking about systems. And the system is institutionally racist.
Thank you, Mr. Dean Okai Snr. Can you tell us, what is ADPAC aiming for in ADPAC? What are you aiming to actually bring to us? And how can we be part of ADPAC to make that difference?
Absolutely. So ADPAC is an umbrella organization. We're not a grassroots organization to deal with the issues of the public. That is where we work with the grassroots groups to coordinate the activity. So as we establish chapters of ADPAC in our stronghold boroughs, so if you think Croydon, Lewisham, Lambeth, Southwark, Hackney, Haringey, Enfield and Brent, when we have our outlets there, for the public, it works like a citizens advice bureau where we signpost all of the delivery partners. And for the organizations, it acts as a CVS so that we build them to robustness, whether it's policies, creating all of the tools that they need to take part to be able to serve our population in the local boroughs that they operate. At another level, it is lobbying and advocacy. So at the moment, we're seeking to affect the terms of reference that are Black and Asian. You see, there's a difference. Asians are being identified by ethnicity, and we're being identified by race, which is why they have access to certain resources that can be ring-fenced, that nobody can self-elect to be Asian. So we want to change the terms of reference to African Caribbean from Black, because at the moment, anybody who isn't a heterosexual white man can self-elect to be politically Black. Also, we're about to incorporate an academic trust, which therefore gives us the ability to teach our children under our own curriculum, developed by Kay Johnston, who the Department for Education plagiarized her entire curriculum. So when we talk about institutional racism, perfect case in point, Kay Johnston is a 40-year plus head teacher who developed the Diamond Enterprise curriculum. She put that forward to gain a free school license, to which she was turned down, but they found her intellectual capital quite attractive. They then character assassinated her publicly for a year, which the case was just dismissed recently. And now they've stolen her intellectual property, which we will also be creating a case to go after them. So by aggregating expertise that goes across economics, education, employment, health, housing, justice, politics, and in terms of politics, we support the We Matter Party with policy. So policies that specifically benefit us as African Caribbeans, but as we know the nature of political parties, they serve everybody. However, we are seeking to create the parity that every other race experiences in the UK. Now, if you think about the Green Party, they create an environmental policy that government adopts. And without the Green Party, we wouldn't see the benefits of environmental adoption that benefits all of our health now. So we support them to do exactly the same for African Caribbeans in the UK, but then our brothers and sisters in terms of African policy and Caribbean policy through the African Union and CARICOM.
Thank you. And we have some comments and a question for you. And the first comment is from Power Extra Radio. Master Moore said, "Well said, Dean." And thank you. And Patricia Bailey, thank you so very much for being a true supporter of this show. Thank you for sharing and thank you for being awesome. And she says, "Wow, well said, Dean. Good evening, all." Good evening, hon. And Holly says, "Good evening and good evening to everyone. This is such a powerful topic. Dean really has summed it up very well." And thank you. And thank you for your comment and thank you for joining us on the show. And J2E says, "How can persons get involved in ADPAC in the local boroughs?"
So if you go to the ADPAC website now, adpac.net blogs, you can look at the local chapters and contact us from there. So there's a contact form in there and we'll follow up and contact you back.